Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the Age of Sigmar MetaWatch for August of 2023. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. Warhammer Age of Sigmar MetaWatch, the battle for Andor. Battles in Warhammer Age of Sigmar have spilled out from the tunnels of the Gallet into the magically infused tundras of Andor. As generals compete to master the sorceress energy trapped within this bittery cold land, thousands of games and dozens of events and tournaments are painting a picture which factions rule the roost. Nick from the Warhammer TV team had a chat with Matt from the Warhammer Studio about what the data says. It's well worth a watch and goes into considerable detail on the state of competitive play in the mortal realms. So there is a little video right there. It's about 30 minutes long, and they kind of sum it up in this article, so we'll just take a look at the article. As with previous MetaWatch articles, the data samples used by the studio cover a 60-day period, which means that only half of the data is relevant to the new General's Handbook Pitch Battles 2023-2024. But by digging into the data, certain trends can already be clearly seen. With that in mind, here are the current win rates as they stand. Bone Splitters have been left off as there weren't enough games logged to properly compare them to the rest of the field. Though many big WoT armies included Warpaint dubbed mobs from this persuasion of orruk. Alright, so I think that's a pretty important disclaimer right off the bat. Not the Bone Splitters thing, but the 60-day period. So all this data was taken from the previous 60-day period, and only 30 days of that 60-day period, or half the period, were actually from the new book. So a lot of this data is just where stuff was at in the end of the last season, and then also where it's at in the beginning of this season. So anybody that was good last season and is still good this season is going to appear to be way higher up. And anybody that was bad last season and is still bad this season, probably going to look even worse. So that being said, right off the bat, we have 3 armies that are too strong. Soulblight Gravelords at 61%, Osiarch Bone Reapers at 59%, and Hedonites of Slaanesh at 57%. And then on the low end, we have 6 armies, and then we could just say Bone Splitters are there too, because they're obviously either so bad or just so unpopular, nobody's playing them. Let's just assume that it's because they're so bad, because people tend to play with things that are good. So Slaves to Darkness, 44%, Night Haunt, 44%, Skaven, 44%, Maggotkin of Nurgle, 44%, and then Cities of Sigmar, 42%, and Stormcast Eternals, 41%. So we do have 4 factions that are basically on the edge of acceptable at 44%. So that is a good sign. So if those 4 factions could all just get slightly better by maybe toning down 1 or 2 of the top factions, you know, maybe those gain just a % here, a % there win rate. We realistically have 3 armies that are too strong and 2 armies that are too weak. And then on top of that, we know Cities of Sigmar is about to get a bunch of new models and then also a new book as well. So realistically, we have 3 armies too strong, and we have 1 army too weak. Now, let's focus first on the weak army, Stormcast Eternals. It absolutely blows my mind that Games Workshop basically creates a faction that is supposed to like represent their whole world, their whole game. In Age of Sigmar, it's Stormcast Eternals. In Warhammer 40,000, it's Space Marines. And then on top of that, the entire foundation of like this universe and the lore and everything is built on the backs of this one single faction. And then they consistently make it the worst performing faction in the entire game. Makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm not saying that Games Workshop should like break Space Marines or break Stormcast Eternals, but they should 100% make them at least decent enough to where people can play with them and do well. If you're going to buy like a starter set or start off with one of these armies, you pick a faction straight out of a box set, you pick the most popular faction, you pick the faction with the most units, and then somehow can't even manage to reach an acceptable win rate. I mean, that's absolutely pathetic. If you look at the Stormcast Eternal Codex and you look at the Space Marine Codex, they have countless more units than the majority of the other factions. I mean, some factions you can literally count the units that you can take on your fingers. Stormcast Eternals and Space Marines have like 50 data sheets, 75 data sheets. I mean, insane amounts of data sheets, the equivalents of like 2 or 3 other books. And yet somehow those data sheets aren't balanced enough to where they can perform at the absolute minimum to be in the acceptable range. That's a complete failure in my opinion. Now, aside from the Stormcast Eternals and, you know, Space Marines being a complete failure in the balance department, the rest of Age of Sigmar is actually looking really good. If we take those like bottom 4 that are at 44% and they did all get slightly better by making the top 3 just a little bit worse, Cities of Sigmar Codex drops with a bunch of new units, and honestly, I think Age of Sigmar is in a really good place. Now, that being said, we'll have to see how these win rates change over time. We'll have to see how the actual Cities of Sigmar book and new units perform. But overall, I have a feeling that Sigmar and this season is going to be really strong. Now, I've been much more focused on 40k and the new edition, and obviously we're getting towards the end of the edition on Sigmar. Probably have about a year left on that. So it always kind of tends to lose its luster a little bit. And then we also know that this season going to be lasting for the entire year, not just 6 months. So that should also help Games Workshop, because the less amount of changes with like the new seasons and everything every 6 months is going to make it so they can better balance the current season, the rules, all that good stuff. So I think one faction that I would pay specific attention to, obviously Cities of Sigmar, but also Flesh Eater Courts, about to get their new book as well, and already up there at 52. So they're basically in 6th position without having gotten a new book, while everyone else has already gotten a new book. Not to mention, should they get a couple of new units as well, Flesh Eater Courts could actually be sitting pretty here. Soulblight Graveyards are very strong and definitely need a little tone down. Osiarch Bone Reapers, probably same thing as well. Hedon Knights of Slaanesh have saw a couple of like small changes, but nothing too crazy. Again, a little on the strong side. But overall, I gotta say, very happy with the balance from Age of Sigmar. And we know that a lot of the stuff they do in 40k, they take from Sigmar. Obviously, 10th edition is brand new, so it's taken them a little bit of time to kind of sort it out. Lots of big changes in the rules, in the factions and everything. And then going straight to just indexes as well. But I think if anything, looking at the Age of Sigmar stats and seeing where it's at 2 years into the edition, and presumably the balance could get slightly better over the next couple of weeks or months. I think for a lot of people that were kind of bummed out about 40k or starting to lose hope in balance, etc., could really look at this and kind of take a little bit of comfort that it may take a little more time than we're used to or would like, but Games Workshop probably going to be taking care of the balance issues and putting the game back in a good place, similar to what we see here with Age of Sigmar. Now a quick message from today's sponsor. CMO Games has been selling Games Workshop products online for over 20 years. They carry the full line of Games Workshop products, including Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, paint tools, and more. Almost all Games Workshop products are priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games takes pre-orders for most Games Workshop products released at their earliest date possible. 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, they go live. Most of these pre-order products are also priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games offer free shipping in the US 48 with an order of $50 or more. Their customer service is top-notch and they ship most orders within 24 hours. Visit CMOGames.com using the affiliate link in the description and let them know that you heard about CMO Games from Warhammer Man. Now, back to the video. Soulblight Gravelords and Osiarch Bone Reapers are excelling due to the good cross-section of units to choose from, which are all viable, though a handful of subfactions are represented more than others. Even the lesser-used Avangori for the vampires and Null Myriads for the Katakros armies are pulling their weight. Previous scourges of the Mortal Realms have seen a dip back into the desired win rate window of 45 to 55%. Most notably, the Caradron Overlords and Gloomspite Gits are back in the sweet spot thanks to some tweaks in the battle scroll and/or. Positive discussions with players and event organizers helps highlight issues for the Orruk war clans have had, and tweaks in the battle scroll meant the Ironjaws, kruleboyz, and Big Wa all punch a bit higher thanks to the new battle tactics. Battle tactics are also in the studio's mind as they analyze the incoming data. The new General's Handbook has seen an intentional shift in how these are scored, rewarding players that dedicate resources to do something, rather than just scoring more for things that they are already doing. Factions like Skaven find the focus challenging alongside the way their Battletomes battle tactics are divided up amongst clans, and the studio is also keeping a close eye on Stormcast Eternals and Maggotkin of Nurgle for similar reasons. With only half of the data from the window covering the new General's Handbook, they are also monitoring factions that appear to be trending downward and identifying challenges in the meta that might be causing this. The Idoneth Deepkin appear to struggle with damage output against particularly tough armies, while the Lumineth Realm Lords' spellcasting specialisms would suggest supremacy in Andor, but access to autocasting doesn't interact with Primal Dice. Slaves to Darkness armies built around common headlines, unlike Chaos Warriors and Ogrid Theridons, are meanwhile a little too flexible in situations that need them to move around the board and accomplish things. Off the back of all this, the Warhammer Studio are digging into the data as much as they can and are actively working on developing the next battle scroll as you read this very article. It's due in September. Alright, so there we have it. I think this one is a little bit less conclusive than we would like. I would prefer to have all of the data from the current rule set, but it is nice to at least see where things are at and kind of keep an eye on what's trending. I do give them props for kind of toning down Caradron Overlords, Blades of Corn, Seraphon, and Gits all appeared like they were going to be potentially problematic right out of the gates. But I think one important thing that we should really pay attention to is how many of the factions that are on top are doing extremely well are from the newest books that are coming out. Because we've always seen some kind of like power creep over time with Games Workshop. But I think Sigmar and just looking at who's on top definitely tells us that power creep is an issue. Because we see a lot of the most recent books that have come out are the ones that are on top. And then if we look at the ones that they just kind of toned down, that was like the round of books that came before them. So I think in all reality, what we should expect is that Flesh Eater Courts with their new book are going to be very strong, especially since they're already near the top of the list. And then, of course, Cities of Sigmar, presumably, we've seen minimal rules from them so far, but do appear like with the new units and the new rules that they should be strong as well. They have some serious potential for like a crazy ranged game. So I think we'll keep watching them, pay close attention to the new units coming out, the new books coming out, and just kind of see how that balance shifts from there. But I have to say, Games Workshop is doing overall pretty good job with Age of Sigmar. I can't personally say from experience in this new season, as I really haven't been playing. I've been much more focused on 40k. But always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. Let me know down below, what have you been enjoying most about the Age of Sigmar season? Do you think any of these stats are a little bit off? Any of these factions are particularly strong or particularly weak and it's not being reflected in the charts? Always like to hear back from you guys down in the comments. Special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the video. Check them out to save 15%. Link in the description. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and this might not be perfectly balanced, but we can only hope that we get balance like this for 40k in the near future. And I'm out of here.